Mathieu Darche has begun to reveal his master plan for the future of the New York Islanders, and this has a lot of fans divided as they're questioning if enough offseason change is going to come for the New York Islanders. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest, but really quickly before we get into that, we notice that 76% of you who watch these videos are not yet subscribed to the channel. So if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? Subscribe as we get closer and closer to our goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers before the NHL draft, where the Islanders have the first overall pick, which is going to be a big part of this plan for Mathieu Darche. And he has also revealed, he's already revealed, that he is almost definitely not going to be trading that pick unless an offer absolutely knocks his socks off. Now, while that's not surprising, some of what he said in terms of who the future core of the New York Islanders is was a bit surprising to fans, especially fans who want to see a big shake-up trade this offseason. As Mathieu Darche on an interview recently, and this was in French, although there was a transcription, so I might be paraphrasing some of the points he made. But according to this article, Mathieu Darche named the core of the Islanders to be goaltender Ilya Sorokin, obviously, defenseman Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov, and then forwards Mathew Barzal and Bo Horvat. And first of all, while there is a lot to be noted on the names that are not in that core that he listed for the New York Islanders, there also is something big to be said over the fact that players like Bo Horvat and Noah Dobson are in this core, along as Romanov and Barzal, honestly, because there have been a lot of trade rumors recently for the New York Islanders centered around all those players, especially around Bo Horvat and Noah Dobson. And this is a signal to the fans that Darche is not planning on moving on from these players. He views this as the core of this franchise. And frankly, this is a pretty solid foundation for a core. Now, one of the big criticisms for the Islanders recently has been the core simply is not good enough. And Darche is going to have a huge opportunity to add to that right away with a first overall pick. When you're drafting first overall, you are adding a piece to your core, whoever that is, whether it be Misa or Schaefer. Let me know in the comments below. I still think it's going to be Schaefer, as it should be Schaefer. In my opinion, watching these prospects, he clearly seems like the best prospect in this draft. But regardless on who that is that Mathieu Darche drafts for the New York Islanders, that's going to be an additional part to that core. As a result, there's a lot of talk, especially when it comes to this roster. And if you look more into the interview, some more of the comments that Mathieu Darche made in this interview really talk about how he thinks beyond that solid core. One thing that's special with the Islanders is he feels like they have a lot of other good complementary and depth pieces to go along with it. It's beginning to sound like this is not going to be this offseason where there's this huge shakeup, this huge trade where somebody like Horvat or Dobson is shipped away for future assets as the Islanders go into a more massive rebuild or retool. It's sounding more like Mathieu Darche is looking to add to this core group and really complete what Lou Lamoriello could not. And for many fans, that is not exactly what they wanted. They wanted to see more explosion, more of a true different direction. And honestly, I don't really know if that's the right fit for the Islanders. And I want to talk a little bit about the Islanders' future and how just because they might be bringing back mainly the same roster doesn't mean that that's going to be a loss for this season, first of all. And also doesn't mean this cannot work in the future, as there will still be moves that are going to be made. Now, notably, there are a couple key players who were not mentioned in this core for the Islanders. And while this doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get traded, I definitely think players who are not mentioned as the core are more likely to be shopped by Mathieu Darche. And the first one you have to note is the captain. Anders Lee was not mentioned in terms of the core for the New York Islanders. In addition, defensemen Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech also were not mentioned. There's a key emphasis, in addition, on Adam Pelech, at least for me, as we're going to talk about towards the end of this video, as especially if you're drafting left-handed defenseman Matthew Schaefer, you're going to have the opportunity to move a player like Adam Pelech to really bring back younger pieces. Because as in his initial press conference introducing himself to the New York Islanders, one of the big things Darche talked about is how he really wants to build up through development systems in the AHL. And while he necessarily wasn't talking just about drafting, a big part of building up the Islanders A team is going to be selecting more prospects. And a player like Adam Pelech can definitely get you a good return as the team looks to get younger. In addition, also getting more speed. While Adam Pelech has been a very good defenseman for the New York Islanders, although He is starting to slow down as he gets a little bit older. He is not the fastest defenseman and definitely seems like a player who can get moved by Mathieu Darche. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other players who were not mentioned on this court. And first of all, talk about how there can still be massive change even if the Islanders do not completely blow up this group this year. Now, I understand the frustration with this group of the Islanders recently and why people want to see big change, but quite frankly, I don't really see that as really a smart option for the New York Islanders. This core is solid, and while it is not complete, it is a good foundation, especially when you're adding a first overall pick to it. And I think the first overall pick is a huge thing you have to consider. Lou Lamoriello, when he was talking to us about his plans, did not know he was getting a first overall pick to supplement this core. And while I still think Mathieu Darche's direction is still better than what Lou Lamoriello would have done, it's really important to keep that in mind when he's talking about perhaps not making huge changes to this group, because he's coming in with the information that he has the opportunity to add a massive piece to this group relatively quickly, in the sense that a first overall pick is going to be playing, I don't know about next season, but be playing big minutes for the Islanders 2 years down the road, where some of their other big prospects are also graduating, which is definitely important to consider. But one thing, going back on track to when it comes to why I don't think it makes a ton of sense to really tear apart this entire group, is there really isn't much reason for it. One thing Mathieu Darche really talked about in his press conference is how he wants this team to be competitive and how he felt like this roster was a playoff team last year, or a potential playoff team last season, the way things started. And to be fair, the Islanders were. And frankly, I think if Barzal does not get injured last season, there were plenty of injuries, but Barzal is the key one to me, where if he plays 65 or so games last season, the Islanders do make the playoffs. Now, without Brock Nelson in the picture, I don't think the Islanders will be taking a step forward. But realistically, if Barzal is playing a full season again, you're realistically looking at an Islanders team that is around the same strength level of the team that took the ice for the majority of last season, really putting them around the 10th worst spot in the NHL. A team that is sort of competitive, but in the end doesn't really have enough juice to get there. And that might sound scary at first. That's actually a pretty good spot for the Islanders to be in. Again, you don't want to tear, as I've talked about in previous videos, you don't want to completely tear everything down and be the absolute worst team in the league, in the sense of a team like the Buffalo Sabres or now Nashville, who accidentally put themselves in a similar position where all of a sudden players don't really want to be on your team. One thing that is so important in hockey is keeping a good locker room. And with the Islanders having the locker room they have, while retooling or rebuilding, and it's looking more like a retool is going to happen for the Islanders, the one thing you do not want to do is kind of have to restart in terms of having people want to play for the Islanders, which is an advantage that really has come and one of the biggest parts of what Lou has done for this franchise. And in addition, while this core might be the same, there are still plenty of moves that can be made to really give the Islanders a different feel. And one thing I do have to point out too, when it comes to people not wanting Kyle Palmieri back up, players like that, the Islanders don't have the best farm system right now. They do have a lot of really good players, especially playing in the CHL and playing for the NCAA. But in terms of the Bridgeport Islanders, we talked about the Bridgeport Islanders winning 15 games this season. There was not a lot of talent to come up and play next season for the Islanders. And because of that, it doesn't make sense to really tear apart your entire roster because you need people to play games next year. Still, you have players like JG Pageau, who we're going to be talking about a lot more in the coming days, who was not mentioned in that talk about the core, who could gain assets and also free a roster spot for someone like Callum Ritchie to come back and really give this team more of a new feel, or bring in somebody else if that's what Darche thinks is the right direction. Lee, as we talked about, was also not mentioned as being a part of that core, and as a result, he is definitely expendable. I don't know how likely it is we see a trade for Anders Lee, but I definitely think that's something that will be explored. And keep in mind, it does not have to be right here at the draft. Perhaps the best offer you are going to get for Anders Lee is going to be at the trade deadline if he has another 30-goal season. So keep in mind too, if the Islanders don't make moves right away at the draft, say the only big thing they do at the draft is draft Schaefer and they have a relatively quiet night, that does not mean that this team is screwed and there's no future. Again, first of all, just drafting Schaefer completely changes your future overnight. But there's a lot of things you have to consider I do think that the more Darche talks, it feels like this is going to be a transition year where he really evaluates what he has on this roster before making big moves. And that might not be the most exciting path for the New York Islanders, but it may work. Especially when you look at some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, specifically in the Metro Division. While it is not the strongest division, you have a lot of teams who believe they are playoff teams this season. The Rangers, who missed the playoffs, are trying to take a step back forward. Yeah, players like teams like Philadelphia, which while are not necessarily quite ready to contend, they're looking to take a step forward in their rebuilds. Then you have interesting teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, which would likely be at the bottom division, but because of Sidney Crosby is there, they are likely going to be trying to compete in some fashion this year. And as a result, the New York Islanders just keeping the same team similarly they had last season, a team that kind of struggled to score goals, was all round okay defensively and stayed in a lot of games. You're likely still going to be around the 7 to 10 range when it comes to the drafts. And while that's not the first overall pick they have this year, in a deeper draft next season, that is going to be a really huge piece for the Islanders. And when you add that to already having both like Cal and Richie, a first overall pick coming up right here in this draft, and then a second pick in this draft, a lot is coming in terms of the Islanders prospect pool really quickly. As a result, perhaps this huge teardown that some people are calling for doesn't make sense. And in addition, in terms of the defense, while you do have to give Noah Dobson and Romanov big contracts, and that's likely going to be Darche's next big concern when it comes to New York Islanders, you have a solid defense to work off of, especially if you're bringing in Matthew Schaefer. You can obviously trade Adam Pelech. He does have a partial no team trade clause, but there are a lot of teams who will take him. And just making smaller moves like that rather than completely blowing up the core could be enough to really give the Islanders the boost they needed, because they clearly were not good enough this season, while still staying relatively competitive and really keeping some of the good locker room and the winning culture in this franchise. And I think that's the biggest thing for Mathieu Darche. He believes in winning culture, and he does not want to have this team completely bottom out. And now they have the first overall pick. I don't think the Islanders really have to. I think my answer would have been different before that. But let me know what you think in the comments about what it seems like Mathieu Darche is going to be doing with the New York Islanders. Are you disappointed that it might be a roster that has a real similar look to last season? Or are you excited to see that perhaps with some tweaks here and there and some better prospects coming to the system, that this could work? I'd love to know your thoughts, as always, in the comments below. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.